what do you think of what's happening in Ukraine right now, in the war where we're at? Because this has been going on for months now. You know, we're in August, and this started in February. You know, Russia's goal was allegedly, or supposedly, shall we say, denazification, demilitarization. Do you think they're succeeding in that goal? Have they succeeded in that goal? Is the war going in their favor? And because, you know, of course, we had a few agreements, so to speak, that the grain could be led on its way and so on. And generally speaking, how do you view things?
Well, I mean, Russia went along with the grain thing for two reasons. One, it's the right thing to do. Russia's not playing cheap political tricks. Russia understands that to deny the flow of grain out of Ukraine is to condemn millions of people to starvation. And so Russia was dealing with the politics of, the Secretary General getting involved and blaming Russia for this. It's not Russia's fault. Russia didn't halt anything. It's purely Ukraine's fault. And so Russia went along with this deal because it's the right thing to do. And they've part of the deal is that Odessa gets somewhat of a breather, not a total breather, as the Russians proved on day one by hitting the port of Odessa, hitting a military facility, hitting a warehouse where military equipment received from the United States and other nations was being stored. Russia said, we won't hit the grain ships. We're not going to threaten the supply of grain, but if you guys put military equipment in here, we're going to hit it, and they will. So the grain thing is the grain thing, and it's good. I hope all the grain gets out. I hope fertilizer gets out. I hope that world hunger is responsibly addressed. The war, I think there's not a Western expert out there who can sit here and say, man, I got this 100% correct. I was always right. I haven't been. Others haven't been. I've been consistent saying Russia's going to win and that Russia is winning. But Russia is winning on its timetable. And you know what's interesting about the Russian timetable? They don't call Scott Ritter and ask my opinion. They don't call me and say, do you think we really should accelerate the offensive in August so that we can make headlines when Europe is on vacation? They don't care about anything other than accomplishing their military tasks. They have depoliticized this conflict as much as possible. What I mean by that is there's no artificial timeline. There's a lot of speculation that Russia had to do X, take Mariupol by Victory Day. You never heard a Russian general say that. You never heard a Russian politician say that. This is purely a product of the West, believing they knew what the Russians wanted. If I hear another Russian expert say this is straight out of the Russian playbook, what Russian playbook?
God, I hate this term, man. Every single time they act like they have a manual hidden in their bookshelf, about this. Oh my God, it's so pathetic.
And that they've read it and that they know it and that they the Russian playbook exists in Russia in Russian and it's accessible only to Russians, and they're executing it very well. I think some things, the initial Russian push into Ukraine was very rapid. And I think it was predicated on some assumptions that turned out to be false. Like they had received the intelligence, Russian intelligence appears to have received some assurances from the Ukrainian military that their forces would largely remain in barracks, and that they had received some assurances from Ukrainian civil authority that the Russian advance would not be opposed. This turned out to be false. Whether the Russians got it wrong, whether the Ukrainians played them, or a combination of the two, that didn't happen. And Russia had to make certain adjustments. But one of the key things of the phase one was, I do believe that, Russia might have been hoping that through a rapid advance, they could cause the rapid collapse of the Ukrainian government. I don't believe they were seeking to take Kiev. You don't take Kiev with 40,000 troops. What you can do is make Kiev believe you're trying to take Kiev and then divert reinforcements there. And the same thing, threatening Kharkiv, making movements down in Kherson, in putting forces off Odessa. You freeze the Ukrainian forces in place, cause a dispersal of Ukrainian capabilities, and you shape the battlefield by destroying command and control, logistics, etc., so that when it comes time to accomplish the primary goal, which was announced from day one by the Russians, which is the liberation of Donbass, that you have shaped the battlefield to accomplish that mission. And Russia now is in the process of liberating the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk. I believe they have liberated completely the Lugansk People's Republic, and they're in the process of working on finalizing the liberation of the last territories held in the Donetsk People's Republic by Ukraine. But what a lot of people don't realize is that whereas there was rapid movement early on in the north, coming down towards Kiev or around Kharkiv up through Kherson, the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic is literally the most heavily fortified territory on the planet. Trench lines, concrete bunkers. The Ukrainians have been digging in for 8 years in depth. And this is a hard nut to crack, and the Russians are cracking it right now. I mean, today, yesterday, tomorrow, you're going to hear reports about the Ukrainians fleeing en masse. They've lost. They're leaving these positions, these hardened, dug-in positions. They're fleeing them because to stay means to die. The Russians have solved this problem. They do it not by dramatic advances, World War II style. They do it by sitting back and just blowing the Ukrainians up with artillery. I mean, how many interviews have I seen now with Ukrainian forces saying, we lost half our battalion and we never saw a single Russian. We never saw a Russian. I mean, how frustrating is that to go to the front line thinking at least you could have a chance to hook and jab with the enemy? You don't get to see the enemy. The enemy's blowing you away, killing everybody and causing you to retreat. That's extraordinarily demoralizing. And that's what's happening right now. We're talking about a kill ratio that could be upwards of 20 dead Ukrainians for every 1 dead Russian. Some people are saying it's even higher than this, that the Russians aren't losing that many people. I don't believe that because Ukrainians have been provided with some very capable artillery systems by the West that are being directed by U.S. intelligence, NATO intelligence, and are inflicting damage on the Russians. Not enough to change the tide of battle, but enough to cause pain to the Russian military and things of that nature. But it's not going to change the outcome. Russia, I've been saying Russia is winning the war. Let me change that. Russia has won the war. Just like after the Battle of Kursk, the Soviet Union won the war. There was no reversing what was going to happen. Everybody, the Germans, the Soviets, everybody knew that once the final German offensive at Kursk was destroyed, that the Germans would never again be able to threaten the Soviets in any meaningful fashion. And it was just a matter of time before the Soviets kicked them out and advanced on Berlin. I think we've reached that point in the Ukraine conflict. Russia has won the war. It's just a matter of time before Russia. Yeah, there's nothing Ukraine can do. There's nothing NATO can do to stop this. There's literally nothing. Yeah, I mean, you can have Arestovich and Zelensky and all the other green shirt wearing. I mean, I'm wearing this in honor of Zelensky. Just to make the point, Mr. President, that I was wearing olive drab before you were born. So you don't own it. Real soldiers own it. So. Yeah, but Zelensky, he's a joke of a leader. Everybody's praising him. I don't know. I don't want to put too much faith in Telegram reports. It's always a danger. But there's enough reporting coming out of Kiev about tension between the Office of the Presidency and the Ministry of Defense. And the fact is, the Ministry of Defense thinks that the president is interfering with the conduct of the war to score political points. Zelensky has to try to shape perceptions that make it appear as if a Ukrainian victory is still possible so he can continue to extort weapons and money from NATO, the European Union, and the United States. So far, he's been very successful. But the narrative is flipping on him. When you have Amnesty International, which is notoriously anti-Russian, coming out and publishing a report that's saying, well, yeah, but the Ukrainians are violating international law by, digging in next to civilian places. That's a big deal. It's a war crime. It's a huge war crime. And all other war crimes are derived from that, because that means it's Ukrainians murdering civilians, Ukrainians holding people hostage, Ukrainians using civilians as human shields. These are things that the West doesn't want to admit, but now Amnesty International is coming out and saying it. When you have the New York Times running front page stories saying basically the war's lost, there's nothing Ukrainians can do. The narrative is changing because the reality is unimpeachable. Russia is winning on all fronts, not just militarily. But you asked the question about denazification, demilitarization. Well, demilitarization is taking place as we speak. They're killing Ukrainian military. Now, this is made more complicated by the fact that Russia is now, required to destroy tens of billions of dollars of additional equipment that's being, poured into Ukraine by the West on a daily basis. Every day you hear another nation's providing them with more Su-25 fighters. Another nation we're providing them with, HIP helicopters. Another nation 200 tanks. Another nation 400 APCs. Another nation 60 artillery pieces. That's a heck of a lot of equipment. And it's being received by the Ukrainians, absorbed, and then sent to the battlefield, and then Russia has to destroy it. If you think about it, Russia has not only destroyed the inventory of the second largest military in Europe, which was the Ukrainian army, trained to NATO standards, equipped with modern equipment. They not only destroyed that, but they've now destroyed basically what amounts to NATO's strategic military reserve, because NATO's been pouring in all of its reserve capability to Ukraine, and that's being destroyed. Now NATO's being tasked with coming up and giving up its operational capabilities. And this is a different question altogether. I mean, NATO's given up so much ammunition right now that if NATO were to go to war with Russia, they'd run out of artillery ammunition in 14 days. And the Russians will never run out of artillery ammunition. So the war ends at that point. And NATO recognizes this. There's a growing recognition in the West that Ukraine can't win this war, and that to continue pouring weapons and money into Ukraine, one, you're never going to get the money back. And two, not only is the equipment going to be destroyed or captured by the Russians, but you're drawing down the very equipment you need to stand up to Russia if you truly believe that Russia will continue this aggression once the Ukrainian problem is resolved. I don't believe Russia will, but there's many people in NATO and Europe who do believe that. And if that's what you believe, then you should make sure that you have the resources necessary to deter that.
Well, NATO's someone's making a lot of money either way, right? Someone's making a lot of money.
There's a lot of money being flown around. I mean, a lot of that money is being dissipated in Ukraine through corruption, but a lot of that money is also being made by the good old boys in the military-industrial complex, both in Europe and the United States.